All right, we're live. Welcome to the Real World Productivity Growth. We've got the episode. Actually, forgot to fill it in, and I'm doing this a little bit later in the day. If anyone's watching this live right now, you know that. But it's a good reminder of kind of rolling with the punches, because as much as we plan and we try to get things done, things happen. And the best we can do is then adapt and kind of roll with the punches and keep going. And remember that even though we may stumble or things happen, don't just give up and throw in the towel. Just keep going. So certainly something I'm doing today, and then something I got to remind myself of, instead of getting frustrated, just reminding myself that, hey, you do have to do this from time to time. Things change, and you just do the best you can. Like forgetting the number of the Q&A. I think it's 53 or 54 today, but regardless, we got some good stuff we're going to go over quickly today. Had a question from a new member who joined the group about remembering the big picture. So kind of obsessing with details that may or may not matter, and then, how you kind of deal with that. Another good question about, of course, always good one, what are some of the best personal productivity apps that people use? And then what are the best ways to manage to-do lists? So real quick, if you're not watching this live, you can always check out the links below. Come join us in the Real World Productivity Growth Group. It's free to join. You do have to answer questions, though. When you go up, click on the link and you join. You just need to answer those. I only want people in the group who are, honestly want to be around other people who are interested in productivity, processes, automation, stuff like that, and who are willing to, be in a group and be open and learn about that stuff. But other than that, let's dive into it. So the first question we were talking about was, remembering the big picture and working on not obsessing with details that may or may not matter. And I found that one of the best ways you can do this, and I think that there's a lot of tips and maybe like some tricks and tactics you can bring to this, but obviously part of what I talk about is doing that daily review and making sure that that's a part of your day. But then going kind of one step deeper into that is, when you do a daily review, hopefully, or rather you do it when you should for yourself, whether that's morning or evening. But for myself and most people, I recommend you do it in the morning. And then when you're doing that and you're doing things like prioritizing your tasks or batching your tasks, before you start doing that stuff, add another, 1, 2, maybe 5 minutes of reviewing what your goals are. What are you working on currently and why? Okay. This is like the really big picture stuff. Like, maybe it's a fitness goal or it's a revenue goal for your business, and reminding yourself about that and why it's important. Okay. So for example, it might be, raise revenue, 10% month to month in order to X, Y, or Z, because that's going to change your business. It's going to allow you to grow, these sorts of things where it's not a task. You're not just looking at a task list. You're reminding yourself why now you're going to go and look at that task list and why you're going to prioritize. And that will help you focus on the correct tasks instead of losing that focus and saying, I'm just getting lost in the details. It's good to constantly refresh yourself because, it's normal. We lose focus over time. And there's a lot of reasons that a lot of these planners work on 30, 60, 90-day type of timelines because, we can't hold our focus for a really long time. Businesses drift, people drift, and we change, and that's fine. But if you want to get something done, you've got to constantly remind yourself of it, even when there's a really good goal or benefit to it. So to summarize that all, just remind yourself on a daily basis why the goals are you're working towards, and then that helps you kind of self-select the rest of the tasks, because then you'll be able to look at that and say, these 3 things over here fit in with those goals I described. These 2 things don't. So, they're the bottom of the pile. Good question. Okay, so what are some of the best personal productivity apps that people use? So that's obviously a really big question. And, I'll start this out, first of all, by saying, as with any of these, that you should use the apps that give you the results you want. And that's the best. Okay, and so having that framework of, I need something to collect my information, something for myself, that's Evernote. I need something to use as a task list. And then beyond that, whatever it is you need for your framework. There's a lot of reasons people use Evernote. It's great at collecting all sorts of information. You can take pictures, you can, record audio, you can write notes, you can make checklists. For to-do lists, there's a ton of apps. I prefer Todoist. I also recommend Focuster with the tie-in with the calendar. That's really neat. But then going into this, again, it's really important that it just works in your workflow. But to go over the top apps, there's a lot. The ones I recommend for a lot of entrepreneurs is Evernote, Todoist, and Focuster, like I talked about. And then getting into kind of the project management side is something like Trello or Monday. And using those are really effective for working with teams, or even working with yourself and starting to get processes that can then be shifted over to a team. So that's just a few. I mean, this list could go on, and it really depends more about what it is you want to accomplish and what the results you want, because the apps don't make things happen, they help things happen. So to me, it's more effective to say, I need better bookkeeping services or results. I need to keep better track of my finances. What apps can help me do that? And then you can kind of attack it from that instead of saying, I just need some apps. So hopefully that's helpful. Always fun to talk about apps. And then lastly today, and let's see, unless we have some live questions come in, I'll keep an eye out for that. What are the best ways to manage to-do lists? Okay, so I thought that this was a really good question, and I think that regardless of how you do it, I'm not going to focus on that. You could use a piece of paper. I know people have used a 3x5 index card, and this was really neat. They used it because if it couldn't fit on there, then it was either too complicated or it wasn't actually a task. They had to be able to distill it down to that amount of information. It could be, an app like Todoist or Focuster. But the idea here that I want to talk about is how you use to-do lists and manage them, in the sense that I use mine, and I think this can work for a lot of people, as you put a lot of ideas in there. You come up with these tasks, right? It's the GTD, or getting things done idea of getting it out of your head and popping it into somewhere. Okay, and again, to me, it's immaterial what actual app you use, so long as it works really well for you. And I certainly obviously have my recommendations, but you get that done. And then when you're doing your daily review and you're prioritizing and you're batching tasks, you then take that and transfer that. Either you're kind of doing a triage, like you're getting rid of the tasks that you can't do that day, that you're deleting because you added them, but you realize they're no longer important, or you're delegating them. Perhaps you're handing them off to an employee, you're handing it off to a partner, whatever that is. And you can do that inside of that same app, depending on how you set it up. Or again, if it's a piece of paper you carry around with you, maybe you transfer it over to your actual then like top 3 task list that you do for the day. But it's that idea of managing your task list and not letting it get out of control. Because if you have no workflow or framework for doing this, then a lot of times it can get out of control and you end up, with that like 100 item task list, which is meaningless because there's so much that, then it really means nothing to you. So I think getting that done and doing a little bit of triage, and again, I highly recommend doing that as part of your daily review. And then it's up to you. Do you need several layers? Do you need things like, hey, look at this in a month maybe, and come back to it? And if you do that once or twice, then after that, if it comes up again, you delete it. There's a lot of different ways you can do this, and it's finding out for yourself what works best. So really like that question. I think there's a lot deeper. You can dive into that as far as how that works and how you manage your task list. But, it's a good first step to just say, okay, I don't want to just dump everything in there, because what happens next? And so obviously you need to manage it. So that will do it for this week, though. I don't see any additional questions. So join me next week, where I'll probably remember what episode it was, and some great questions this week. And I will be back in next week.